This episode of House of the Dragon is just as good as the last. And if these two episodes are any indication of what season three will look like, it is undoubtedly going to be the best season of this series, no questions. And to look at this episode, just like the first episode, many consequential things occurred that I'd like to break down. So, in the first scene, we see Rhaenyra confront and come face to face with the corpse of her son, Jace. And we have to understand this is a relief and, in a sense, a type of closure that she never got with her other son, who died, if you remember, in the finale of season one. And Emma D'Arcy's acting here, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was incredible. It reminded me a lot of the grief and the mourning that we saw in Hamnet, of just her reaction. It was incredibly visceral, it was incredibly provoking, and she did an amazing job. And when I'm watching the scene, I have to wonder, how is she going to unleash this fury on the Greens? So that was the first scene. And then we see many other characters. Again, we're seeing our taste of Lord Corlys. We understand that his sons, especially Adam, is going to be more important in the series. We see Daemon telling his soldiers to march on the King's Landing. But then I'd say the next big event that occurred was, for me at least, again, seeing King Aegon and Lord Larys. Again, we only get a snippet, just as we did in the first episode. But I'm telling you, this is my prediction, and I have no doubt about it. The journey that they're going to have is going to be hilarious, a lot of twists and turns. I cannot wait for it. They're teasing it out slowly and slowly, but I hope to see, and I'm fairly certain we're going to at least see like some episode where at least half of it, or I should say a quarter of it, is dedicated to their journey. So I cannot wait for that. It was great seeing at least a preview of what their future is going to look like in the series. But again, after that acting scene of Rhaenyra, we see Daemon tell his men to go march on King's Landing, and he then is able to actually come back to Dragonstone and talk to his wife. And Daemon, we have to understand he's a ruthless character. So as I'm watching him tell Emma D'Arcy, sorry, Queen Rhaenyra, don't let your children die in vain. Of course, he's doing it for his own fulfillment. I'm obviously imbuing these negative motivations on him, where he just wants his family name at least to sit on the Iron Throne. But it works. I'm very glad, of course, that he did that, because it would have made for a lame episode if you see the Queen just grieving the entire time. So they fuel up, they go to King's Landing. And it's when they get to King's Landing that made the episode so great, because this episode was really building. The entire thing was building up, 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 up. And then the climax happens in like the 10th to last minute when Rhaenyra takes the throne. The things before that were not as consequential. The two big things that I want to talk about were, you see Aemon, who's also, I'm glad they dedicated a scene to him, of him just going into Harrenhal, killing men, seeing how good of a swordsman he is. And of course, we understand that this is a setup for when we know that the two unstoppable forces of Daemon on the one hand and Aemon on the one hand are going to collide. So, because we see Daemon fighting, killing all these Kingsguard men, doing like 1v5s. We see Aemon doing the exact same thing. So, this is all in anticipation of seeing what's going to happen when they collide. But of course, the big thing that happens to Aemon is he's mortally wounded, unsurprisingly, when he tries to raid Harrenhal and he meets Lord Alice. So I actually have no idea where that journey is going to go. It'll be interesting to see. But of course, the main intrigue of this episode is on the side of the Reds, or I believe they're called the Blacks actually. Is on the side of Rhaenyra and company. I'll just make it simple, where she lands in King's Landing, and eventually she storms the Iron Throne. And the cinematography was excellent, where we see blood on her shoes and she's walking up to the Iron Throne, leaving footprints of blood, of course, symbolizing that, to get on this throne, you got to get nasty. You gotta kill a lot of people. You got to slit some throats. So that was great symbolism. And then one of the best things was seeing Otto Hightower, who I didn't expect to see this early in the season. I thought that he was back at his I thought he was back with the Hightowers. I forget the name of their little town, but I had no idea he was in King's Landing. But he's brought before Rhaenyra, and she's hesitant at first to kill him. But I'm very glad that she does kill him, because she has to show herself to be a strong leader. And his decapitation, sorry, is a pivotal moment, because Alicent comes in right after, and she has to see the decapitated head of her father. So then we have all these questions. So first off, let's look at the question between Rhaenyra and Alicent, which is, Alicent, if not for her actions, Rhaenyra would have had a much more difficult time of conquering King's Landing. So is Rhaenyra going to keep her word and spare Alicent and her daughter? My prediction is that she's going to. But now what I think is Alicent is going to be embittered towards Rhaenyra, where at first she was just trying to be a broker between a peace. She was trying to appease Rhaenyra and have there be no more bloodshed. But in seeing the action that Rhaenyra did to her father, I think she's going to try to pretend to be Rhaenyra's friend, while actually then telling her son Aemon, listen, I made a mistake. I want you to come. I want to attack these Reds. I want to get my revenge. So that's my prediction with Alicent. I have no doubt that they're going to be alive. I'm just curious to see how she reacts to the death of her father. And the death of her father in itself is a symbolic event where Otto Hightower represents the usurpation, meaning that after the death of Viserys, it was Otto Hightower and his mastermind plan to try to get his own family on the throne. If it was not for him, there'd be no Battle of the Dragons. There'd be no this series would not exist because Rhaenyra would be the undisputed heir. But instead, he recognizes that since Rhaenyra is a female, he can propose a challenger. So he has Alicent be his wife, and she produces him male heirs. So Otto Hightower represents the stratagem of the Greens to take the throne. And his death also represents that there's a key turn in the tide of war where the Reds are now in power. I have to ask myself, how is this even a battle anymore? Because before, Aegon at least had the appearance that he was king. He was in King's Landing. He was in the capital. He was sitting on the Iron Throne. And even though Rhaenyra had more dragons, and even though people had sworn to her, Aegon had the tangible fact. You could kind of see it with your eyes of the fact that he's the head of state. He's the king of Westeros. But now you have Rhaenyra, who was sworn to before while Viserys was alive to be queen, and now she's sitting on the Iron Throne for everybody to see. So I have no idea what claim Aegon can have to try to compete with her. And we haven't even recognized the fact that Aegon is a cripple. Nobody knows his whereabouts. And he's essentially acting as a peasant. He isn't even acting kingly. And then you have Aemond, who is the only person that I could imagine trying to pose a challenge to Rhaenyra, but he's going to be out the next episode. Again, I mentioned he's mortally wounded. They're going to have to nurse him. He's going to be weak, and I bet his whereabouts are going to be known. So there's going to be at least some plot point where Daemon probably tries to send assassins. So I have no idea how the Greens are now going to be able to make this a battle instead of just waving the white flag and moving on. That's kind of everything I wanted to cover. This was a great episode. I'm really trying to think if I missed anything. I will mention this, the only weird thing in this episode, again, just like the first episode where they added that weird scene between Aemond and his mother, I don't understand why they would have the scene where the Masters of Whispers tries to force himself upon the queen. To me, that was just illogical. I don't even know who this character is before. And if he's the Master of Whispers, you got to imagine he's a smart guy. So this is just a careless action. To me, it makes no sense. I don't understand the motivation for putting that in, but that's my only critique of this episode. Everything else was great. Just like season one, the ending leaves us with more questions and more excitement for when we watch season 3, episode 3. I'll be sure to post my review next Tuesday, so 2 days after Sunday. And I hope to see you in the comments. I hope to see you viewing it.